Welcome to the CX Sessions from the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Every episode, we provide an innovative perspective on customer experience from the people who are changing your world, one experience at a time.
Welcome back to CX Sessions from Melbourne, Australia. I'm Simon Chris, and I'm joined today all the way from Old Blighty, London town. Mike Havard has joined us. Mike, welcome to the CX Sessions.
Thank you, Simon. Good to see you again.
Thank you. And it's always great to catch up with you. I know it's usually over a beer. This time, unfortunately, it's over Zoom. In case there's somebody on the planet that doesn't know who you are in the CX world, a little bit about yourself and your journey in CX.
Yeah, sure. It started, I think, like a lot of people in this industry, way outside of CX. So I started off actually as a research technician in cosmetic science. So was doing work on hairdressings and other such things, diving deep into the data about what was going on with different chemical concoctions that people around the world were putting on their head.
Okay.
And I actually loved that. I loved working in the lab. I loved that whole scientific component of what I did, but realized that actually I was at the tail end of the dog, and it was these bright young things in marketing that pulled all the strings and had all the ideas, and they didn't really want to listen to us in the labs. And so I took a decision to go back to uni and did marketing, business and finance, and joined BT, where I had a brilliant 9 years back in the late 80s, early 90s, and found that a fantastic organization that really invested. And interestingly, for an utility, essentially a government-owned utility, just recently privatized when I joined, really quite forward-thinking in what it wanted to do with customers and how it thought about customers. And probably the biggest piece of my learning there was about understanding the brand. And how that was so important to align with in any of the customer service design. This was an organization that had grown up just plugging in wires into people's homes, and actually what they realized in the time I was there, and I was sort of part of this whole movement, was it's about connecting people and connecting emotions and connecting families. It's not about wires. And I think that for me was the start of, my epiphany in CX, which is it's not about telco and it's not about ACDs and it's not about digital. This is about connecting people and changing emotion and finding that bigger purpose. And so it really started from there. And I then moved through consulting and BPO and worked for some great businesses, Decisions, Sitel, Verint, and over the last few years have been running and sort of building my own consulting and analytics businesses in this space.
Yeah, and you brought through that research and analytical that was your original pedigree. You've brought that through into the work that you do in CX now, right?
Yeah, very much. I mean, this was actually the thing that I spotted in BT, and I guess gave me a bit of a personal advantage, was there was so much data around why people had issues and what they wanted to contact the business about. And my scientific background gave me a real appetite to dive into that where others were ignoring it. And so sort of combining this broader view of the brand and the opportunity around, what an organization like BT could do if it understood alignment through the business, but built on the brand, along with a deep dive into the data and sort of understanding patterns and understanding what you can do to create really some quite significant differences to how customers are managed and even operations are scheduled by understanding the data. Actually, I think I had a fairly lucky, you could say, opportunity to develop both ends of that spectrum and bring it into something in the middle, which was hopefully valuable and useful to the organizations I worked with. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've experienced your work firsthand, having been in meeting rooms with you and, talking to clients and things. And I love the fact that you most often will just sit there and then all of a sudden just say something that's absolute liquid gold. So for any of the people listening to this podcast, if you're not connected with or following Mike Harvard on LinkedIn, you are missing out. Go and do that. But in particular, one of the things that
Simon, do you want to be
really,
my agent? Do you want to be my agent?
yeah,
Thank you.
I'm on your payroll now.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely true, because one of the things that you brought up in a meeting once, it has been one of the most enlightening and pivotal things for me, was your model around figuring out the value of interactions and therefore what to do with them. Could you talk us through, explain that model a little bit, because it's fantastic.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few models around this, and I wouldn't at all claim it as my own, but there are.
No, claim it. It's yours. You can have it.
I think the important point around it in any model like that is like I said earlier, to try and spot some patterns and to try and understand what's really going on. And a context for that question is one that is not often asked in business, and that's, what is the value of what we are doing with our customers? Everyone will know the cost, and it's about driving that cost down. But the really important question is understanding value, and there was a dimension that we developed when I was at Ember, a company that I set up with a few other colleagues, and it was about the value irritancy spectrum, and where there is irritancy in the customer's issue, and it is an irritant to the organization, actually, because they shouldn't really be dealing with this type of contact. That helps you provide a pattern around those types of contacts and what to do with them. And essentially, you can think about lower cost, more digital ways of dealing with that. But at the other end of the spectrum is where there is a conversation that needs to be had, which is valuable to the customer, as in, this is really important to me. It's really emotional or financially important, or it just feels critical in some way. But importantly, it's also valuable to the organization. And they can see that there is a potential here. And that might be because of my long-term relationship as a valued customer. It might be PR damage if this isn't managed well. It could be a whole number of things. But where there's value for both parties, then that's about investment. And that's about not looking for lowest cost solution, but looking at how you optimize any engagement. And that needn't be a reactive engagement. It might be proactive and anticipating the opportunity and reaching out in some form. So that's just one model, Simon. But rather than the value irritancy model being a value in itself, the important first question, as I've said, is an organization to get its head around wanting to understand value, because very few do, and they waste an awful lot of value profit in pursuing low cost, unfortunately. And that's been an identifiable trait through most of my career, and it's still there, unfortunately.
Yeah, wow. It's funny because you hit right on a point of what's of value to the organization may not be what's of value to the customer. And I remember at the time you and I were talking about the very weird world of policing, of all things, where a citizen rings in to say, I've lost my mobile phone. I left it on the bus. Now, to the police, are they even going to find it? Do they really care? Or there's a pothole in the road, don't really care. But to the citizen, that's a really important, I've lost my phone. The world is going to stop. But on the other end of the scale might be someone who rings in and says, there's a guy with a strange looking backpack. And, most citizens, to them, is that important to them? No, not really. It's just a guy with a strange... To police, that's a really important, because that's a potential threat. So just thinking about it in that irritant and value way is just a great way of deciding where do we place our efforts. Because anything, as you say, that's in high value to the organization and highly valuable to the customer, there's your gold nugget. I mean, there's really where, yeah. That's awesome.
And building on that, Simon, is the importance of managing expectations, right? Too many organizations are fearful of telling customers what they really need to hear in that context, right? So you've reminded me of a project we did many years ago for a police force in the UK, where they had huge complaints around the reporting of car crime and thefts from cars. And the victim would ring the police and say, look, my car's been broken into, this is traumatic. And the police would go, we'll get someone round as soon as we can. Actually, without any intention of sending someone round, because this wasn't a priority, right? But they didn't want to tell the customer that. And actually, the best thing that they could do for the customer is to say, look, we do have other priorities. We are stretched. If we can get to you, we will, but we probably won't. But here's a reference number for your insurance claim, because that's probably the main thing that you want out of this.
Yep.
But just to be really clear, we are not coming.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And you know what? Satisfaction went up once that small initiative had been implemented. So, you know, it's a complex, and this is why I love it, right? It's a complex world. There's many patterns, there's many things to think about, and customer expectations are as important to think about as actual experience, actually.
And that helps me pivot into the next area I want to touch on, which is the current challenges in CX. I mean, you know, I know you talk with a lot of very senior executives and company boards and the like. What are you seeing as some of those big challenges in CX at the moment? Is it changing customer expectation? Is it staffing? Is it tech? What's bugging people?
You know, huge array of different things, but I would I would put it down to just a few things. One is the value issue, right? That's a challenge, right? So enabling CX leaders to be able to think long term, right? And them being brave enough actually to think long term, right? There is a fear I sense in a lot of roles about it's about keeping my job or keeping my reputation intact, and therefore I've got to deliver some short-term, you know, wins and hits, rather than making some of the right long-term decisions for the business that actually is going to transform it and drive real value, for the longer term, right? I see that issue in our politicians, not just in our businessmen, right?
Same in Australia.
Right. I think that's the first thing. The second challenge is having the opportunity to initiate good design, right? I think poor design is at the root of most of the service and CX challenges we see, right? And you know, most of the challenges are about reacting to things that have gone wrong, whether that's technical, process, people. And so having the opportunity to really think smartly about the design of the service experience or the design of the CX experience, and stepping back and looking at it through the lens of not just the customer and the organization, but both where they meet, and thinking about, you know, it's bigger than journey, I think, Simon, because this is about design of systems, it's the design of product, it's design of experience, and you know, and it's just being really smart around that, you know. And I know that they're an overstated case, but Apple, I think, is just one of those companies that understands design. You know, when I first started using an Apple computer, I was hugely frustrated because I couldn't fiddle with the operating system like I could, you know, with a Dell or a you know, Microsoft operating system. And then I realized actually I don't need to, because it works, right? And I don't need to go fiddling with the operating, you know, system code. It's just not needed. And I'd love to say that about my engagement with my local utility or my insurance firm or whoever it is, right? But I am finding myself fighting a system that's badly designed. And I think that's the huge challenge, because, you know, CX is often too often looked at as the reactive discipline to deal with issues, right? And it shouldn't be. It should be the proactive discipline that anticipates customer needs, right, and fulfills them, or
Yeah, and
customer expectations.
a recent edition of this podcast, my guest was talking about how CX gets done to him, not
Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
And I've related, you're on an aeroplane, they feed you when it's convenient for them, not when it's convenient for you. And it's similar along those lines. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think you're right on the money there. What about the future view? Where is all of this CX stuff going? Gaze into your crystal ball and tell me what you see.
Well, I would like to think that we get, brave leadership that think through the opportunities, not just the problems, and are able to design businesses, products, services that just work and work in all contexts for all people, whether that they're dealing with disadvantaged customers in some form or very particular niche customer issues or users. They're not playing to the majority. I think it's an opportunity in the future where technology will play a much bigger role in managing me, and I'm happy with that. Actually, I think most people are happy with that if they're getting what they expect and getting what they need. Again, the issue that people have, if you talk to them openly now about the role of technology to answer problems, or technology as an interface, whether that's AI based or simple IVR based or whatever it is in the world of service, is that it's just poor design, right? It's trying to do too much when it's not capable, or it's trying to be too clever when it's not clever enough, or it's just been poorly thought through by people who are rushed and incentivized to get something delivered rather than something effective. So I think that opportunity is the future, and I think we'll see organizations really start to stand apart. I think the other future I'd like to see, whether it materializes or not, I don't know, but is one where organizations really understand brand, and brand, not just from a marketing perspective, but right the way through the organization, so that service is aligned, product is aligned, customer experience is aligned, complaints are aligned, and people understand that. Again, back to that question of value, the value of what the organization is doing to support that brand, and what it stands for, because in the future there's going to be very little differentiation other than brand, and so if we're not aligned to it, we're undermining our companies.
But that requires, I think you're totally right, but that requires a lot of companies to go through a significant cultural change. We've always made taps, and taps is what we do, not we're a service organization that just happens to sell taps. I mean, that's pretty fundamental organizational cultural shift, which is big, particularly against a backdrop, I think, of corporations having a very low tolerance for failure, which also contributes to, hey, I'm going to do this short term and I'm not going to rock the boat too much because I don't want to fail. When you compare them to, say, SpaceX, where their latest space shuttle blows up and everybody cheers, how do you see organizations being able to move through such a huge cultural change? Is it just that the market are going to force them to do that, or they're going to go out of business? Or do you see an economic benefit for that? Like, how would, if you were trying to sell that to a board, how would you sell that?
Right, no, great question, actually, and I think there's no easy answer to it, but the thing that usually shifts the mindset at the board to embrace this type of opportunity is competition, right? They see either others doing it, or they see a real threat to their business, and the question is, how far out do they see that competitive threat? If they see it far enough out, they've got the opportunity to do something about it. if it comes in rapidly and is nipping at their heels, then you'll see a whole load of short-term reactive activities. And I think, generally a threatened organization and an organization in difficulty, right? So the cultural piece is a significant part of it, and it's not an overnight fix. And so if the board have a serious enough view of the opportunity to do something, then they can do it. And I've seen good examples of organizations that have achieved that very, very effectively. But it takes brave leadership, and it takes foresight, and it takes an understanding of the competitive dynamic that you exist in. What I would love to see, right, and this is the purist in me because I know it ain't going to happen. I would love to see the organization wanting to do this, off their own bat, right, and thinking hard about a brand and consistency through the business and the service experience and all of that being aligned. I just don't see that without some external dissonance, without some external threat to the business that forces them into it. And as I say, the better view of that they have of that into the future, the better chance they have of doing the right things to address it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting too, and this is an area where I know you've got some pedigree, is in this BPO space. This stuff is impacting them. Technology is really impacting them. What are you seeing for that, for those BPOs? Like, where do they go to next? What does the world look like for them?
Oh, I think it's tough. I think the history of BPOs shows us that they are poor innovators, and they are driven by seat sales, essentially, occupancy in their buildings. And what COVID taught us very quickly is that buildings aren't essential. And so there is a financial model that is now impressed upon these guys, that is, you've got a lot of expensive buildings and you don't actually need to be putting people in them because people are happy to work from home, or clients want them working remotely. And so how do you square that circle of needing high occupancy when the client model, the operating model, doesn't necessitate it? So that's the first big challenge for these guys. The second is that they have often failed on looking for their differentiation. What is it that means you should buy BPO A versus BPO B? When it's really all been about the pricing model driven by occupancy and efficiency. And they haven't, I don't think, in my view, been particularly smart at differentiating on value, on technology, on innovation, on different service models, for example. So, as you know, Simon, I'm involved in an organization called Limitless, which is all around gig CX, and that's an innovative model that I think brilliantly combines the operating efficiency with the brand opportunity by getting consumers to help other consumers. It's sort of, peer-to-peer.
Could you unpack that a little? I don't know that gig CX is a term that a lot of people are aware of. Just a few minutes on what that is.
Yeah, of course. But before I do that, the point is, it's an innovative model that very few of the BPOs are seeing as a threat when they absolutely should be, right? It's a whole new way of working that completely changes the model, because it's about only being paid for resolved cases, and it's about finding fans of your business to help other customers or potential customers of your business with the problems they've got. So, for example, in the gaming world, if you've got somebody that's really struggling to get to the next level in a game or whatever, rather than reaching through to a call center agent who's probably been in the job for just a few weeks, doesn't really know much about gaming, is probably going to be leaving the job within 6 months, versus connecting that person with the question through to somebody who's an avid gamer, has been doing it for years, works for themselves, and answers that question wherever they are in the world
Mm.
with the passion of knowing that brand, knowing that product, right? That's about crowdsourcing your service. And it's not just about the cost efficiency of doing that. It's about you're tapping into people that really love the brand and want to help others do that. And then when you pay those people to help others, my God, right? The spiral of positivity around the brand goes through the roof, because you got people that love the brand and want to be advocates for it, actually getting paid to help others, right? It's amazing. And so that whole model totally challenges the idea of what BPOs have been set up on traditionally, which is recruiting people off the street, trying to train them in something they're not familiar with, and hoping they hang around long enough to make a small margin on it.
That's
Right?
right, and get return on investment. That's very true. Actually, there is a telco here in Australia, I won't name them, that was using a crowdsourced a gig CX type model. And they decided to shut it down for various business reasons. But one of the interesting things that happened was there was an uptick in complaints about their own staff. And the reason for that is that when they went through to someone, a gig person that understood, they knew how to do things and the processes better than the telco staff. And so
Totally.
people started complaining that the telco staff didn't know enough because these other people were too good. So it's exactly to your point. Exactly to your point.
Totally. Yeah.
All right, I've got 3 questions that I love to ask everybody, and I'm going to shoot them at you and get your answers. The first one is, what makes a great customer experience for you personally? Mike, you're out there buying shoes, getting your haircut, whatever it is. What makes a great customer experience for you?
It's a dull answer, Simon, but it comes back to design, right? Just someone that's thought about it. It doesn't need to be thinking about, in fact, it shouldn't be thinking about the complaint side and managing me. It's someone that thinks about that experience right the way through, right? So they just know how I'm going to react when I get the product, when I want to start using it, where my bumps are in the journey of using it and familiarity with it, thinking about how I might want to tell others about it, right? And supporting that whole process. So again, companies that just can sit back and take proper time, proper consultation, look at the data, look at the patterns to say, we know how Mike is really going to get off on this, and we're going to manage and plan every step of that.
Yeah.
And when it isn't done like that, that's when I really notice it, right? And as most of us, we notice the problems more than we notice the smoothness.
Yeah.
And I just had an issue recently with an insurance claim where I was told something completely incorrectly by an agent, and it cost me a lot of money. And in trying to raise this issue with the company, they said, you were misinformed, and we're really sorry about that. And do you know what we're going to do? We're going to reprimand the agent. And I said, well, that's fundamentally not the issue.
Yeah, that's
here,
right. It
right?
doesn't help me at all.
She doesn't help me, but also she was great and helpful, and she was following the process that you designed.
Yeah.
Right. So that's just infuriated me to the point that A, I would never use that company again. B, I've been telling everybody not to use. I won't do it here, but telling everybody not to use that company just because of that one remark. That was, they just don't understand how to design a process well for people generally, let alone someone in my specific situation.
Yeah. All right. Question 2. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice about CX, what would it be?
Be lucky. So I've had a great career. A lot of it has been luck, genuinely, Simon. But I would say, what I would say is learn and work with the best. I have been really fortunate to have worked with some incredible people, learned from some incredible people from my time in the laboratories, through BT, through BPO, and others. And therefore, what I mean by that is what I would say to my younger self is, don't coast, don't just accept stuff, learn, challenge, talk to people. When someone that's got great experience is offering you advice, think really hard about what they're saying and try and apply it, because it's probably come from somewhere. And what I would hate to see in my kids and in youngsters is a coasting attitude where they just accept things, right? So that's the advice I would give.
Awesome. And the third one, I love this one. What book are you reading? What podcast are you listening to? Or generally, what's influencing you these days?
Well, I'm at that stage of life, Simon, right? So I'm sort of reading books that I've read 30, 40 years ago when, I loved them then, and I just think, I'd like to go back. So right now I'm just finishing 1984, George Orwell, which is, one of the most phenomenal books, full of foresight, and it has so much relevance to the world today. It's just mind-blowing, actually.
Wow.
So it's less about business books these days and more about broadening the mind. And in fact, a book that I finished just a few weeks ago, and it has probably been in recent years the closest to changing my life, actually, is called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And just I would recommend that to anybody. It's just if you are in danger of being like I was, which is a head down workaholic, this will change your life. And I look back and think that maybe I didn't spend the last 30 or 40 years in quite the right way.
I think we could all do with that book. Yeah. Mike, look, it's been awesome. This could be a 4-hour podcast. I love chatting with you. I think the last time we were together was in Glasgow about the middle of last year. So I'm looking forward to catching up with you again soon. But thank you for being on CX Sessions.
Simon, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All the best. That's it for this session. Let us know what you think or recommend someone for a future session at cxii.com.au. This podcast is brought to you by the Customer Experience Innovation Institute. Thanks for joining us, and tune in again soon to hear more CX sessions.